What's up, pallies, friends, colleagues, acquaintances? Sometimes there's stranger dangers, but everyone's a perfect stranger. Everyone's perfect, you just don't know it yet. So good to have you here with me today or tonight or whenever it is. I'm hanging outside today with my buddy, Matthew Nelson, a.k.a. Matt Moon. I've known Matt now a few years. He's one of my more recent buds, and what a great guy. Man, he's just chock full of so many great stories and power-packed, that's right, power packs of information and big-hearted guy, you know those people, you know that. And I'm excited to be outside with him in Tucson, the winter sun, and just catch up with him, get to hear some fun things, what he's been up to, what his life is, where his life has taken him up to this point in time. And so I want you to share that with me. It's because sharing is caring, and that's the kind of guy I am. So that's what we're going to do. I want you to just buckle on in and strap on a snack pack, and let's get to it here. Let's see what happens when we chat together. Chat. We're like a couple chatty Charlies. Yeah, that's it. I don't know much about a lot of things, but I do know some stuff about a little bit. Matt has turned me on to so much cool world music that I wasn't aware of, and I am super grateful for that. It's a blast also playing music with him in the Kirtan group when we've performed. So here we go. Enjoy.
All my friends till the very end, thank you for the fun and the play. Until next time, I hope you all do fine. Live to see another day. My pals and my peers, throughout all the years, you've done so much and wished me well. My guides and my teachers, all the furry little creatures, show me how to ring my bell.
And we are here, live. I'm outside with you. We're outside together.
It's the best place to be. Is outside, listening to birds. Actually, I just read yesterday this wonderful new study that came out that is talking about how human relationship with nature actually has a direct or is directly affected by birds. The presence of birds and the sounds of birds affects us on like this molecular level that we've probably all kind of known. Birdsong, I mean, really, we could talk about that for 2 hours.
Yeah,
but
should we just do that?
But an independent, wonderful study where bird sounds were placed, artificially, and then people were literally surveyed, and found that the connection to nature was heightened by birds. And maybe it's wildlife or nature with a capital N in general.
Yeah,
but birds. And so we're out here with the birds this morning.
We are with the birds, and this is a great backyard to get some really fun, like cactus wrens and Gila woodpeckers come by a lot. We're getting more hawks downtown here, which is nice.
Yeah, you need them to eat all the pigeons.
Got to get the pigeons. They just gobble them up, man. The fun thing with the bird songs is I do have a little area in my music library where there is just like sounds of nature. And it's great. I'll play that sometimes in the car driving around, and it feels like you're in a little jungle, a forest, just your own private forest, driving around, and it's really nice. It's very healing. It also made me realize when you're saying this, I remember once doing a hike up in outside of Telluride, Colorado, and my friend had a bird song app. So like it was basically you could find these different birds if you feel like you spotted I think it was like a gray jay or something, then you hit the app and it plays a little song, and then they start singing back.
Wow.
Which was really fun, because then you're like, okay, I identified the bird and it's singing. But then I questioned the app and wondered, what are they recording from the bird in the first place? Is it like a threatening song?
Right.
What's on the
alert?
app?
Or,
Yeah.
right,
An
yeah.
alert? Is it just like, be careful, danger's coming, and then you just keep playing that?
Well, there should be. I would assume there'd be options. So you can
Yes.
pull up the J, and then you can say, alarm call, sweet love song.
Yeah.
And then
I'd probably use Sweet Love Song more.
I know that's
than
why
alarm.
I said that. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in we realized probably 9 months.
That's tragic.
And not
but
because
it's,
either one of us was pregnant.
right.
I didn't skip town because,
our friendship gestation period was about 9 months. But I
Just-
like cycles. I like cycles
Yeah.
like that. The continuity and seeing you again and connecting with you and
Yeah.
inviting me to participate in a
Yeah.
podcast. you know.
Yes.
This is my third one in life that I've ever.
Really?
I've been on the radio a lot, but in
Yes.
terms of podcasts, this is the third one in my adult life.
What were the other podcasts that you were on?
Like a ultra running podcast,
Yeah.
talking about the Arizona Trail, and this individual, Candace Burt, who lived in Washington and actually attempted to do the Arizona Trail faster than anybody had done it before, and just got walloped by the pandemic happened
Yeah.
right as she started in early March, and so the pandemic happened as she was leaving the Mexican border.
Oh.
We let her and her crew know about it, and then she hit the Catalinas in wicked snowstorm, like one of those heinous snowstorms.
Oh man.
So shortly thereafter, she decided, I'll come back and do this some other time. But she fell in love with Arizona and has actually just moved to Catalina. So she's leaving Washington, moving to Arizona. So yeah, that was one. The other one was a doctor in Scottsdale who does a lot of sports medicine, but was really fascinated by the Arizona Trail.
Yeah.
And so had lots of questions and just kind of talked about the trail and people's interactions with the trail and their experience. So
Yeah, so that just brings that up. Since we're on it, talk to me. We're on the trail of talking about the Arizona Trail. I'd love to hear about your history and involvement with the Arizona Trails.
so we'll start from the present.
Yeah.
How about that? And
'Cause
then probably
you should-
bounce around.
Yeah, we bounce around here because usually I'm like, I want to hear about what was your first word and where you from. So we will just backtrack.
Yeah.
But for now,
Can't go there. We're past that.
we're done with
We're
that.
done with that.
Yeah,
I subverted that with bird song. Did you,
You
like
did,
that? That
you
was so
did.
smooth.
It was really good. You knew not to go there.
Yeah. So starting at the present on the Arizona Trail, there's this amazing path that goes through the entire state of
Yeah.
Arizona, the Arizona Trail. It's a national scenic trail, which is a big deal because there's only 11 of those in all of America. Some are more famous, Appalachian Trail, for instance, and then to the west of us, the Pacific Crest Trail. A lot of people have heard of both of those. But there's 11 of these amazing national scenic trails in America, and one of them is the Arizona Trail. And so I work for the nonprofit organization that helped build the trail and now maintains it, promotes it, protects it. And so, yeah, that's what I spend most of my waking hours doing is helping people find out about this trail, open to hikers and mountain bikers and horseback riders, encouraging them to get out there and experience it. And really the hidden agenda is just like nature immersion, because I think that when we're outside, like now, and hopefully wherever you're listening, hopefully you have some access to outside, the experience is so much richer. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm the best version of myself if I'm outside. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what I'm doing, as long as I'm outdoors, it's natural. It feels, like me being me. So if I can help provide these experiences to people, the trail's hopefully always there and always open, and they can experience it however they want. But I think it just makes for healthier people, healthier
Yeah.
planet.
Totally. I absolutely agree with that. When was the Arizona Trail formed? When did they start creating it in that
It's
way?
kind of an idea. It was a guy, this Flagstaff area school teacher, who's kind of one of my gurus, Dale Shewalter. He had traveled a lot throughout Arizona, both working and studying, and had spent a lot of time in the Sky Islands near us.
Yeah.
So, Santa Catalinas, Rincons, Santa Ritas, Huachucas.
And so for people who don't know Sky Islands, because there's people that aren't from here, they've maybe visited. I love the name. And what is it? They're just they're the higher points, right, in
Yeah.
Arizona. Mount Lemmon has Sky Islands.
Exactly. It's one of the Sky Islands. So, it's poetic, actually. It's a kind of a poetic term for all these desert mountain ranges, because the Baja part of Arizona, if you look at it from the air on a topographic map, it looks like an accordion. It's like just been smashed together, and all the ridges have created these mountains, and they rise up out of a sea of desert.
It's when God was learning
islands.
When God was learning the accordion, he just smushed. He's like, I'll give up that instrument. I think I'll play guitar.
God was in a Norteño band.
Yes.
Yeah. These Sky Island mountain ranges, beautiful. So, near us where we are now, we're at probably, 2,500 feet elevation above sea level. And in between us and zero is all sand, sand that's eroded from these mountains. But the mountains nearby go up to 8,000 feet, 9,000 feet. And then you go over to like Mount Graham and the Pinaleños, and it's, even higher, up above 10,000 feet. And in Arizona, that's kind of special to have these biomes where we can see what the Earth looked like 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 500,000 years ago, just by looking at the botanical changes over time. And of course, as things warm and dry, which they're doing, we're seeing the desertification of these mountain ranges.
Yeah.
And the species and the things that are on top are disappearing. But it's an interesting part of the evolution of the desert.
Yeah. That is really interesting, just that you say that, and am I mistaken? Like, I did hear this a long time ago, that Arizona is the most diverse bioregion, like, state.
I think every state says that.
Really?
I've heard Alabama say that.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Florida, absolutely. California,
Wow.
come on, it's got to be California.
That's fun. That's like state pride. You just have to say, we're
They're
the most diverse.
We are the most diverse.
That's interesting.
Yeah, but I think the biodiversity that exists in Arizona is unlike anywhere else. And especially where we are now, it's this beautiful crossroads of the Sierra Madre that come up from Mexico and the Rocky Mountains that come down from the north, and then these two deserts on either side of us, Mojave to the west, Chihuahua to the east, and they come together in the Sonoran Desert.
Yeah.
And so we're at the epicenter of so many different characters, and a lot of times I see those characters as like yuccas and saguaros and, aspens and pine trees and all these interesting things. But when they all kind of come together, the forests, the biomes, the communities, the biotic communities that are formed are, pretty unique. And I think whether it's consciously or subconsciously, people fall in love with this area for that. Oh, this reminds me of Colorado. There's parts of Arizona and the Arizona Trail where I'm like, this looks just like Canada.
Yeah.
With spruce trees and big wide open meadows. So anyway, this guy, Dale Shewalter, was wandering around these mountain ranges, and he'd been on a lot of the trails and was looking from mountain range to mountain range and being like, what if there was a trail that connected the Huachucas with the Santa Ritas, with the, the Rincons and the Catalinas and up to the Mogollon Rim and go home in Flagstaff and then cross through the Grand Canyon. He had a vision. I mean, let's be honest, this was a vision. Yeah. And actually that vision came to him on Coronado Peak, which is a tiny little mountain at the southern edge of the Huachucas, right on the U.S.-Mexico border.
Oh.
So on Coronado Peak, looking over the borderlands with the sunrise coming up, he had this vision of this trail. And if he were still alive, I'm sure he would say he was not the first one to have that vision. That vision had been had by hundreds or thousands of people before him, but it was his time to pick it up and run with it. And the timing in history was such that, he worked for the Forest Service, had lots of connections, and started to share his vision with others. And it really kind of, the energy just continued to build and build and build. So between like horseback riding groups and hikers, state parks, National Park Service, everybody supported the idea. This is in the 80s. And because mountain biking had already been around for a few years by then, and this trail is, so new in the national trail system, that mountain biking was embraced as a use. Yeah. So the trail was really kind of built and designed and designated outside of wilderness for hiking, mountain biking, horseback riding. And that's how I found the trail. Wow. Originally I was on a bike ride with some friends down in the Santa Rita Mountains by Kentucky Camp, and was riding along a dirt road, and all of a sudden there's a little brown trail marker, and it's got the state of Arizona. It says Arizona Trail, and there's a little dot going through the middle of it. And having grown up in California, I was very aware of the John Muir Trail.
Yes.
Which was, from Mount Whitney to Yosemite, which is the area where I grew up. And then it connects to the Pacific Crest Trail also, which is much longer. The entire way, all the way through California and Oregon, Washington, up to the border with Canada. And so I thought, wow, there's a trail through the whole state of Arizona. I'm going to check this out.
Yeah.
And the more I checked it out, the more I found that it wasn't done yet. I would be riding on a beautiful piece of trail on my mountain bike, having a good time, and it would stop in the middle of the desert. And so at some point I got real frustrated, so I contacted the organization, and I said, what's the story with your trail? It just ends in the middle of the desert. And they said, well, it's not done yet. You should come help us.
Wow.
So I got
That's it.
Yeah, that was it. And then that was maybe not 20 years ago, but maybe 20 years ago. You know how that happens. Like,
Yeah.
it was just,
Yeah, it was just like a
20
few
years
days ago.
Yeah.
20 years. Here I am.
So yeah, it's like many things there. It's a thread. I feel like the Arizona Trail has been a thread, a common thread that connects me to the landscape, to wildlife, to current events and issues and people mostly. I mean, the number of people that are connected through this physical pathway, but more so like an energetic pathway or a historic pathway, has been really meaningful.
Yeah. How long does it take to hike it?
Of course, like everything, it depends.
If it's
if you got to the point in your life where I said, okay, I'm just going to take, some time off and I'm going to walk 800 miles through the whole state.
Yeah.
Carry what I need for 4 or 5 days, dip into towns occasionally, maybe mail myself some packages to random locations so I could get fresh socks or whatever. About 2 months.
Wow.
Takes most people about 50 days. You take some days off, you see some things, on the side. Because moving every day is like this really natural human activity. We're bipeds. We're supposed to just be moving every day.
Yeah.
And so getting back in touch.
You mean I shouldn't just be sitting on my computer all day?
No.
Watching movies?
You're part of the problem. Shouldn't be sitting here listening to the podcast. No. I guess you could listen to this on the fly.
Yeah, you could listen. You can walk with this. So that's
not recommended.
This episode specifically, people, walk. Make sure you're walking. You're a biped, for God's sakes.
So yeah, getting back in touch with that natural rhythm of being a biped and just moving across the landscape, and your cycles become such that you're so attuned quickly. Even if you've not spent much time outdoors, to sunrise and the changes, throughout the day, the importance of water, finding water, filtering water, consuming water, carrying water to get to the next place, and that's part of the Arizona experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, about 2 months.
Yeah.
But it's been done in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
People that can really kind of crank out the miles can get it done much faster.
They can hoof it on that one.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And does it connect then at that point to, will it get to the other trails, like the specific? Yeah,
we're too far east to connect to Pacific Crest, and we're too far west to connect to the Continental Divide Trail over in New Mexico, Colorado, all the way up to the Canadian border as well. So no, we're this independent little island trail that starts in Sonora and Arizona border and then ends at the Arizona-Utah border. And there's grand adventures to be had in both directions. And I joke sometimes like my next big project will be the Sonora Trail, like a beautiful trail through the state of Sonora all the way down to probably the border of Sinaloa.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah. How many people do you have that are working with this group, like with Arizona Trails? As
like a nonprofit organization, there's about a dozen of us that work on various things within the organization. Me as the executive director, and then youth education outreach people, volunteer coordinator, graphic designer, social media person, trail director. The list kind of goes on and on. It's an amazing collection of people, mostly in Tucson, Phoenix, and a couple of people in Flagstaff as well. But the heart, the soul, the core of the Arizona Trail Association is like volunteers, members, donors, friends, and there's thousands and thousands of people.
And that's like folks that'll go out and take care of maintenance, trail maintenance and stuff like that. Geez, that's amazing.
Which is another way to connect to the landscape, like volunteerism. And here's the, if you like spending time outdoors and you love trails, definitely get involved with organizations that do trail maintenance. But be careful, because sometimes it's so much more rewarding than just trail activities or recreation that you'll never go back, or you'll never be able to recreate on a trail the same way again. It's a bit of a curse, but it's beautiful, because I think once people learn stewardship skills, whatever those are, could be gardening, trail maintenance. There's lots of different ways to kind of care for the earth and care for our backyard, and doing it in a meaningful way that balances different sciences. Social science, especially when we're talking about trails and humans, it's just a way to connect on a deeper level.
That's beautiful, man. So it's really inspiring too, just knowing that this is right in our backyard, really, and people can take as long as they want or as little as they want, and just get on it and just do it. And really getting to go on a trail that's not just kind of like right off of the road where you usually go and, do a mile or something. It's like, it sounds really neat. Like seeing uncharted territory, that you normally wouldn't in these areas of the state. How did you get involved prior to that? Like, what were you doing? So this was 20 years ago. What was happening before this?
Riding bikes.
Yeah,
riding a lot of bicycles. But I think the common thread from, I think, really straight out of high school and all the way up until now, which has been a lot of years, has been connecting people to nature. I feel like if there's one thing that makes me happy is that I'm meant to do this. My responsibility, my seva, is to connect people to nature.
Yeah.
And it's come in different forms, as an outdoor guide, as a writer, photographer, as lots of different things that have kept me connected to the outdoors. But more so than just me spending time outdoors, it's like, how do I encourage people to get out there?
Yeah.
And that's been kind of the common thread.
How did you get started with this when you were little? Where did you grow up?
You're bringing it back around. Darn it. My very first experience with hearing that voice say, you got to go do this. You should be doing this. Is your responsibility to do this. I was probably 20, not 19 or 20.
Yeah.
And I'd come from a rural area of Eastern California, just, up the valley from Mount Whitney area, south of Bishop, in a little town called Big Pine, California. Population 1,500. Now it's probably population 1,100, but it's just like one blinking light that you drive through really fast between L.A. and Mammoth if you're going skiing or climbing or whatever. But growing up there, we had the biggest backyard. It was huge. The Sierra Nevada on one side, the Owens Valley to the north and south, and then the White Mountains to the east. And you couldn't see any structures other than these, tiny little towns, but vast wilderness. And so, to me, that was normal, and I'm so grateful that I had that experience. And I moved to Tucson because there's no opportunity there. I grew up in a small town. There's nothing to do.
Do you feel like when you were in that small town that you were like cognizant of like, I really wish I had friends, or there was friends? I mean, I'm sure you did.
Had friends? What are you? I didn't say that part. I did spend a lot of time alone, though. You must have just channeled that. A lot of time alone. But.
It's like the fact that, it's like you get both of those. You have some friends, and you have this big open space. Did you ever, at the time, were you like, I really wish I could have like more video games to play?
Oh, always, always. And my friends had video games, so we'd hang out and I'd play there. Well, we didn't have them in our house.
But there wasn't like a cognition of, I'm missing out on like mainstream pop culture stuff. Like living in an urban environment or something like that.
Correct.
That wasn't there.
I didn't even know that existed, really.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It's interesting, You don't know what it is. If you don't have it, it's not really an issue. Yeah.
So moved from their little small rural town to Tucson. And Tucson to me, and this will be funny to you coming from the Philly area, Tucson was a big city, damn.
It was the reverse for me. It was like this is a small little...
Right.
Little
but for
town.
context, like the people I graduated high school with, Big Pine High School, there was 19 of us. Yeah, 19 of us in our graduating class, which was the biggest class in recent times. Like there was a little bumper crop for some reason, with our particular class. But so many people that I graduated high school with were close personal friends who I still stay in touch with. I look back through yearbooks or photos, and we started in either preschool or kindergarten because it was a small town. Not a lot of people came in, not a lot of people went out, and so I had this consistent community for most of my upbringing. It was dysfunctional as all get out, small town, rural California. I mean, wow.
But that's romantic. That's really sweet.
No, it's tragic. But the wilderness kept me away from some bad situations, that other people were getting themselves, into. That was just part of the culture. Small town. It was half the town was reservation, Owens Valley Paiute Reservation, and then the other half was, non-native.
Okay.
It was an interesting place to grow up. But once I came to Tucson, big city, and then it really kind of struck me that there are lots of young people that are growing up in Tucson that can see the Catalinas and the Rincons and even the Tucson Mountains and have never been there. And
That's crazy.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
But it's real common.
Yes.
And I started volunteering for an organization called Inner City Outings, and it's a project of the Sierra Club. They still do it, although it's called Inspiring Connections Outdoors now. But I started volunteering to just go pick up groups of kids, do a little bit of fundraising, rent a van, grab some snacks, hook up with a school, and then take their students out for a half day or a full day somewhere nearby to just get them nature experiences. And the first time I did that, I'm like, this is what I meant to do. This is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah,
you know?
man.
And being able to ask those questions, like, how many of you guys have ever been here before? And one or two, but sometimes no hands at all. Okay, you know.
And it's like 20 minutes away.
You can see it.
That's wild.
We get back to school and you can point up there and say, just so you know, that's always there for you. It's free. It's nearby. And, you know, guess whose land that is? Guess who owns that? None of them ever guessed, oh, this is mine.
Yeah.
They all had all these ideas. Oh, it must be the state or the government or the president or, you know, somebody else's. This is somebody else's. I'm like, no, this is yours.
This land is your land. This land is my land.
Yeah.
That's it. My mom taught in the inner city in Camden, New Jersey. It's arguably the worst city in the country, like very violent and tough. Taught for many, many years. Mainly to third grade, and they went, I think, to the beach at one point. I think they went down to Florida. No, it was at least the beach, just an hour away, less than an hour away.
Jersey Shore.
Yeah, Jersey Shore, the beach, and they had never had that chance ever. You know, it was like that was just a whole nother world. You know, they're in the inner city, and boy, it just really gives you a wake up, you know, that like how free and grateful we are to be able to do that, you know? And then the stuff that I complain about, it's like, come on, man, reality check. This is like
to move unencumbered across big landscapes and different jurisdictions without, you know, harassment, violence. Let me see your papers. I mean, it's
really weird.
Pretty easy.
Yeah, I mean, I am aware of it more. I was aware back east when there's more of an African-American population, and then here it's like with, you know, Hispanic and immigration. You know, it's just we didn't have Border Patrol cars, Jeeps going around when you drive out to the city. Like that's,
right.
So I remember first encountering that, and I think we got pulled over once, and the band I was in, and, you know, we were like sleeping in these loft beds in the back on this tour, and then they were just like, oh, okay, yeah, just go on. And I'm like, wow, like that's not the reality for other people if they get pulled over. Right. That's, big wake up.
Yeah, white privilege all the way. Actually, my daughter and I have an 11-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
She and I had the conversation. I mean, it was this summer, I think, when we really had it. But as she's becoming more aware, you know, one of the things that I think has been reinforced in the elementary school she went to is just kind of like Latino culture and history, right around the corner, Davis Bilingual Elementary, and then now Paulo Freire Freedom School, and they're really in sixth grade integrating social justice into curriculum, which I'm like, that's great, and maybe that happened when I was in sixth grade, but I don't really think so. No, didn't catch that until it became self-aware in high school or whenever. Yeah. But we were talking about, white privilege and how easy it is, you know, for her, for us, you know, for me, especially white male, you know. Yeah. And it was demonstrated as we drove through Border Patrol checkpoint in between southern Arizona and Tucson, went down to play on a little lake. Or something. Yeah, exactly. Went down to play on Peña Blanca Lake or something. And on the way back, Border Patrol looks in and say, have a nice day. Yeah. You know, and then as we're driving away, there was a few cars ahead of us, of course, that's pulled over. All the doors are open. All the people are out. You know, the hatch is open. It looks to me like a family. And the car's just being, probably a dog alerted or who knows what. Yeah. And I watched her watch it. And she just started crying. Yeah. And then we talked about, why is it so easy for us? Because we look the way that we do. Yeah. Don't feel bad about the way that you look, but be really aware of that. Right. And do whatever you can to fight that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's really hopeful to hear that that's happening in school now. And I can only imagine that's going to be going on a lot more and starting to get implemented in way more schools and systems, that it's really because it has to happen now, like earlier. Yeah. It has to happen with the youth, Right. It's like people obviously can repair and this big rupture, but for the youth to have that really instilled is going to be like amazing. Yeah, and it's your job too now as a parent. It is. Yeah, I know. As your daughter grows up, that education is extremely important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely there. We gotta. Yes. When you were coming to Tucson, then you've told me a story before about the work you did in the archaeological field. How did you get into that? Can you maybe tell some?
Wow, that's another.
Tell the people about it.
So I think the root of interest in anthropology, archaeology, ethnomusicology especially, I think it's always been there. It's always been like my favorite thing to read, my favorite thing to study, my favorite thing to listen to.
How did that happen? Like, would you remember a moment?
No,
when it was
not really.
It was just there.
I think it's always been there.
Just
Just
maybe
interested in culture and history,
Yeah.
ancient culture, modern culture, the link between the two. I think it's just I've always been really fascinated by that side of science.
Past times.
Yeah.
That carried over this.
But the musical bullet.
Yeah.
Not bullet, arrow. Really, that got me was listening to Peter Gabriel.
Oh.
So as a young person, had a pretty diverse musical influences, or as diverse as you can imagine for a small rural town. But lots of music in the house. No musicians, but Dad played a lot of albums. Mom played a lot of albums. Brother played a lot of cassettes. And so there was a lot of music going on, sometimes competing sounds and, interest. Mom was really kind of old country western. And Dad was, grew up in L.A. in the 60s. And so it was everything. It was, Santana and Neil Young. And I mean, you name it, huge record collection, which I still have. But at some point, I heard Peter Gabriel, and that, like the voice, these different instruments, I was like, this is so soulful. I love this. And at some point, I heard him sing with Kate Bush, Don't Give Up or whatever. And she melted me. I'm like, okay, and I love this person. And so the more I started listening to Kate Bush, I mean, that's some far out there
we had a roommate that would play this one song of Kate Bush's on repeat. And it would happen like every day. It was... it's like this really and the video is really trippy. She's like out there. It's awesome. And it was this really crazy like sci-fi name to this planet or something. I forget what it's called, but it's oh my gosh. I'm not going to spend the whole episode looking for it. And trying to
you are.
It out,
it's gonna
It's gonna be in the back on the back burner simmering there. But it's just like, what is this? Nothing like it. And so. Okay, so those two.
Peter Gabriel to Kate Bush, and then at some point I was listening to a Kate Bush cassette. I probably still have it, the Dreaming, And on that song, the song starts off with this deep, low tone, like a didgeridoo.
Yeah.
And the very first time I heard that was, I thought, the first time I'd ever heard it. But as soon as I heard that cassette, all the hair on my arms stood up, and I just had this visceral memory of a dream that I had had. As a kid, where I'm inside a cave. Like I walk inside a cave and it's dark, and I'm very aware that it's really dark. And then all of a sudden, I notice there are these petroglyphs inside the cave. And so I'm staring up, and where I grew up, we'd seen petroglyphs, and I'm seeing these beautiful petroglyphs inside this cave in the dream. And then from deep within the darkest recesses of the cave, this sound comes out, filling the whole cave and my whole self with this resonance and this sound, which was unfamiliar to me in the dream. And as this happened, I watched the petroglyphs start to move and come to life and dance across the cave wall. And it was so much that I ran out, not screaming, but just ran out of the cave because it was, a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And this dream was on repeat, and I didn't have it every night, but I had it dozens of times, which felt like hundreds really, throughout my lifetime as a kid. And then hearing that sound brought back that memory. And what I realized is the sound that was coming out of the cave, of course, was a didgeridoo. And so she led me to that. And I wanted to learn a lot more about where this instrument came from, who played it, what its history is, because I feel a connection to it like nothing else at the time.
The dream time.
The dream time, exactly.
Interesting that it was happening wow.
Yeah, in the dream. So I pursued that, moved to Tucson, met a guy, Alan Shockley, who many people involved with the Aboriginal music, Australian music, didgeridoo world know of this guy because he created what he called the Northern Sonoran Dreamtime Pipe. He didn't want to call it a didgeridoo because he didn't want to culturally appropriate something from Aborigines.
Yeah.
And he was using agave stalks, and agave don't exist in Australia. So The didgeridoos over there, of course, made from eucalyptus that had been hollowed out naturally by termites. But here you can take an agave stock, which has very soft, pithy wood, and core out, the center, and then be able to use that as a didgeridoo-like instrument. So anyway, found a guy who had one, introduced me to Alan. I started taking lessons, learning circular breathing, playing just, every, like you do with a new instrument. Every waking minute that I was, blowing my face off into this thing and making terrible sounds. And after a while, it stuck, and it felt good.
Yeah.
And I felt like I was a decent player. So then I traveled to Australia and sought out my favorite didgeridoo player, and basically asked if I could hang out with him for as long as he would have me around.
What?
And he did, and he put up with me.
Who's that?
David Hudson. David Hudson, probably one of the greatest living didgeridoo players. From the Jabberwocky people in northwestern, near Cairns. And Coranda is the little town where he lived outside of Cairns, way up north in Australia. And wow, yeah, phenomenal guy, sweet, wonderful family, but internationally known didge player and Aboriginal cultural ambassador.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my foray into, I think, musical travels. And then that soon dominated my life.
Wow.
I really wanted to learn more about different cultures, different instruments, different traditions. And so it was a lot of reading, a lot of listening, a lot of research. And this was mostly pre-internet when all this was going on.
And so people...
No internet, people.
You could still function and survive before the internet was there.
Yeah.
Asking Mother Google, Father Wikipedia. You had a rich life.
Very rich
Traveling.
life. Learned a lot.
Yes.
Read a lot of books.
Yes.
Went to the U of A library, would check out stuff, both music and books, all the time, and it just became a passion. Just learning about different people and different histories and how they're all so much the same and so relatable through music. And I think that's the thing that I still love about listening to music from all around the world now is that because I don't speak the language that I'm listening to, I turn off my analytical brain.
Yeah.
And I just start feeling it. And so the music flows through my ears, and it actually doesn't go up to my head. It goes straight down to like my heart.
Yeah.
And that's how you can tell when music is good.
Yeah.
Is that it feels good. And even if you don't speak, fill in the blank language, music from Ethiopia, Amharic, you're like, I don't understand a word of Amharic, but you can tell that she's singing about loss or love or celebration or elation or a wedding. Like you can really feel these things. And of course you read the liner notes, you do research, and lo and behold, there it is. But it's just vibrations, right?
Yeah, right.
It's just vibrations. And I think good musicians or any type of practitioner have the ability to get in touch with vibrations, people's vibrations especially. And if you're really good, you can manipulate those in such a way that creates harmony or balance. And as a musician, imagine that your instrument, instead of being a scalpel or a needle for acupuncture, is a guitar or a lute or a lyre or tabla drums or whatever, and being able to manipulate those rhythms and those vibrations so that they have an effect on people. Is there anything greater?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Maybe
not.
I just
Maybe not.
It's been on my mind a lot recently because of the power of mantra, and being able to vibrate these things. And there's definitely feels like there can be cliches around that. People hear, we just say something and it vibrates and it, resonates and like, it's true. It is true. It's like, we are vibratory beings. We're in a vibratory reality. This is made up of vibrations, hopefully good vibrations.
Yeah. On a cellular level.
Yeah.
That's just it,
Yeah, it's it's there. So really, the power of words, the power of sound, that have an effect on our cells and in our being. So that's amazing. It's like you said, it's medicine. It's medicine.
Yeah,
it's medicine for the soul.
In mantra, I think especially, I didn't have any access or experience to a Hare Krishna culture. Where I lived, there were Christians and not Christians,
Yeah.
And that was it. And I'm sorry, to be fair, there were, I think, a number of different sects of Christianity.
Yeah.
For lack of a better term. There's a whole bunch of different churches.
Yeah.
Pretty much common theme, but different things going on. So I didn't have access to Buddhism or any of that. Dad was an atheist. Mom was like a reformed Christian. So neither one of them believed in much. And if they did, they certainly didn't put it on their children.
Yeah.
You know? And I got curious and started exploring and asking questions. My dad was like, here's the deal. There's a lot of stuff out there. There's there's so many different things out there. You should go out, check it out, figure out what works for you.
Nice.
He's like, none of it works for me, but good luck. Good luck on your journey. So, not to derail the conversation too much, but I had no access to, like
nice
Hare Krishna
it's nice
culture.
he was like,
encouraging.
Go try it
Figure it
out, and not just be like, it's nothing, but for him it didn't work, and for you, he was still given that option.
Yeah.
So
and maybe I heard the Maha Mantra with the Beatles, but we didn't listen to a lot of Beatles.
Yeah. Beatles did us quite a service bringing
big time,
that in.
big time.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
They got to
But my very first experience with kirtan or Krishna culture at all was being a really young man, 17 or 18 probably, went to visit my brother in Southern California. He lived in Laguna Beach.
Yeah.
So I left the little town, in the pickup truck and, drove down to Southern California and arrived on December 31st. And as I was, just parked down by the beach, again, pre-cell phone, so I couldn't call him, couldn't use the map app to figure out, I had an address, and then I had to figure out where this address was, And so I just parked at the beach and then, started walking uphill looking for, numbers. I figured I'll just ask somebody, and so as I was walking along, I heard this sound coming down the street toward me, and it was clapping and it was singing. I could hear bells, I could hear drums. It sounded like the coolest thing I'd ever heard. And it was a group of people that had just come out of the Krishna temple, Govinda's, of course, in Laguna Beach, and they were doing the Maha Mantra. And what else could I do? I jumped in and started singing along.
Yeah.
And I didn't really know, but it didn't take too long to figure out Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And the more I sang, the better it felt. And so I joined the procession and went all the way down to the Pacific Ocean and was literally lost in that mantra for 2 hours, maybe more. And at some point I realized I should go find my brother. And so eventually I did. And he said, what happened to you? I was like, I got kidnapped by the Krishnas. And it was beautiful and wonderful. And it was many years before I explored that music more and that tradition more, because it's a form of yoga, of course, bhakti yoga. And the more I learned about it, the more it kind of resonated literally through mantras, not just the Maha Mantra, the Hare Krishna, but through many sacred mantras.
Yeah.
And with vibration, you can really affect the mood. And that's what I love about Indian classical music the most, is you have these master musicians that are playing ragas that are hundreds or thousands of years old, that are prescriptions for a feeling. You can really, over the course of 40 or 45 minutes, manipulate a raga and bring people to a state of absolute Shakti, just inner peace. And sometimes you got to go through different emotions to get there. But that manipulation of vibrations and the understanding of how we can use music to infiltrate the ears, to hit those bones, to send signals to the heart, that's pretty incredible.
It is.
And finding that through mantra, which is how you and I connected.
Yeah, that's how we got.
So tell me how we connected.
We connected through the group in Tucson that we both are members of, the Chaparral Kirtan Band, and that's when we met. Yeah, because you were taken over, I think, I think it might have been, when we started it, I forget around what year. It might have been in 2014. Gabrielle Petrangelo and I started that band together, and it was very just piecemeal together. And then I think Will Duncan joined in for a little bit, Laurent from Tucson Yoga, and then
Malika. I think
Malika was the one. Yeah, so Malika took over on tablas, and then she left town, and then you joined. And
it's not often that somebody is like, "Hey, we need a tabla player."
It's not.
You don't hear that real often.
No, and they're hard to come by. There's not a lot of tabla players. Usually you hear we need a drummer. Our drummer's gone.
Right.
Or our drummer's a dud.
Asleep.
Yeah. So finding you was great. Yeah, I remember going out to get some food before our first kirtan at Tucson Yoga with your daughter and a few of us. And so that's where we met. And
the nature of that band, if people aren't already on the list, or they're not already big fans of yours and they've heard all your give them the lowdown on what Chaparral Kirtan Band is or sounds like.
Yes, the Chaparral Kirtan Band is folk-inspired kirtan group that's based in Tucson. We do kind of more some non-traditional kirtan, Indian kirtan.
Mm-hmm.
So, where I'm assuming like traditional kirtan is basically like tablas, sitar, harmonium. And so this is like, we do have harmonium, we have tablas, but guitar, bass. One of the members had a bowed banjo,
Bowed banjo,
violin. So, a big just meshing of all these sounds. And then some Sanskrit, some English, mixture. And it's really fun. And so with that project, as you and I have been doing it for a long time, we thank goodness we finally have an album that's going to be out. Hopefully, oh man, if you can't see me, I'm crossing my fingers right now that it's out and done by early spring of 2021. And eventually when we can start performing, in centers again and places, that would be great. Because it's really, to me, it is a live experience.
Absolutely.
It's like being with people.
Yeah, I don't like listening to kirtan music.
No.
I'll be honest.
No, I'm also, it's funny talking about this because, like, I'm not a big, like, kirtan fan. I don't like, I love world music. You've exposed me to some things, and, as we'll talk maybe a little bit with your radio show on KXCI. And just hearing really great world music. But, like, I don't, like, sit and listen to kirtan artists and, and all that.
Yeah. But participating in it live, either as playing the music or doing response vocals. I mean, the call and response nature of kirtan, it's so simple and repetitive, but that's when it gets really good. Like once you lose yourself in the mantra, like you can levitate. Yes, when you start to see people floating off the ground, it's great. It feels very, very good. It's a really nice feeling. And I think for a lot of people, me personally and other people close to me, it's been hard to let go, to get comfortable with saying like Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Krishna, Krishna, Hare Hare.
Yes. It's weird. I wasn't raised like that. I was raised in the kind of place you were talking, not so much, but more progressive, Southern Baptist Christian, but it was like sweet, nice people. But like, I don't think I ever heard Hare Krishna until, honestly, probably George Harrison.
Yeah.
Hearing the Beatles, that was it. That was like the exposure.
Yep.
Something like that. So, or going to Govindas. The many Govindas all around the country, going to eat there and be like, wow, there's a Govindas everywhere.
Yes, as there should be.
Yeah.
They're very wonderful centers, I think, of food and consciousness and like love. And that's the thing that has been my guide in seeking spiritual connections. Is that I've experimented with lots of different religions, salad bar style, sometimes diving in deep, but really like a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Ooh, that tastes really weird. Moving on. But really
this one's expired.
Or fermented sometimes. But if I can take that, the religious experience or the sacred writings or the music or the whatever it is and like push it through my heart filter. Okay, how did that feel? And if it feels really good, if it feels like love, then I'm like, okay, I can resonate with this. Look past the dogma, but I really connect with this. And especially with Krishna consciousness and mantras, that won the heart every time. It was like, oh, it's just love. It's just these people so full of love. Music that is full of love. Food that tastes like it's full of love. So it's been a little bit easier to for me to embrace. Because of that, because it feels like love. And very interesting awareness for me with Krishna's, especially in California, because that was like that one experience in 25 years. I had that one experience with that community. But airports, you remember there used to be a lot of Krishnas hanging out at airports when that was a thing, pre-TSA.
I remember recently we were flipping through and saw the old movie Airplane. Do you remember there's the whole scene there? And it's like, that's really where it's
maybe
like,
that was my exposure to Krishna culture was Airplane.
But they were
Nielsen.
But they were in airports. They were definitely in airports. And it's like way more back in the day probably when you could just like even walk up to the
Right.
the gateway.
Hand out books and stuff. Chant. Yeah, I don't think that's happening now.
That's not going to happen.
But I was leaving an airport once, and of course, as you are generally going into or leaving, you're as fast as you can get out of there. And I walked by these two guys, and one of them, they were both, Krishnas. But as soon as I looked into his eyes, I was like, that dude is so familiar, and stopped me in my tracks, and we started talking. And again, 40 minutes, it's like stream of consciousness, just talking.
Yeah.
We both recognized each other
Yeah.
and had this powerful conversation. I was like, I'd love to talk more, but I got to run. He's like, here's a book, and then I was on my way. And that's happened with people within that community over and over and over again. And it's always an eye connection and then a heart connection. Wow, this person is so familiar to me.
Yeah.
Which is almost unexplainable, but maybe not.
Yeah. There's a really, if people also want to know more, go to your Govindas. But you could also, there's a fun documentary that came out. Did you see that one?
No.
It's the founder, the one who came from India to the U.S. with nothing. It was just like it's a fun story, so people can get into that. Just really sweet about the beginnings of the U.S. Launch.
The launch, the movement.
Launch, the movement, and so that's fun. The documentary, it's called Hare Krishna, the Mantra, the Movement, and the Swami Who Started It All. If folks want to know. So when you were, as you started going in more with music, this was just, it sounds like you definitely had an immersion, time where, obviously you still are immersed in it, but there was a period of that. So what was it like time like as you were just like, what was your life like as you were doing that? Were you still was this pre-Tucson now, or is this? No,
I think, a lot of these experiences were all after moving to Tucson. I came here as a 17-year-old, so really straight out of higght school.
Yeah.
As a bike racer, and then just found interesting jobs.
Yeah.
But my goal was
live
cheap,
that's
save a bunch of money.
That's what
Tucson is known for.
It's like the early days of Tucson. I think it's changed a lot, but it was like, find interesting jobs.
Gig economy.
Plural.
Yeah, a bunch of them.
And then you piece it together, and then you have time where you get out.
Yeah, exactly. But it's so, especially then, but so inexpensive living in southern Arizona and could live very simply. And so, although I was did not make very much money at all, would live really simply, save as much as I could, and then just do a trip. And the trip was always motivated by leaving the country, getting as far out as I could, but trying to find a musical immersion experience. And some trips had very little to do with music, but for the most part, I was seeking out musicians, countries, cultures, sounds that really resonated with me. Australia was the big one. That was the first trip. That was a really big one, but there were others that allowed me to kind of dive a little bit deeper into music. And after some of these like field trips and gathering information, and again reading a lot and starting a radio show and sharing this music with others, both stuff that I collected in those countries and stuff that I found around town, at some point I was like, okay, I think I've been told you got to go to college your whole life.
Yeah.
And at 17, it wasn't really an option. There were no colleges nearby. Family had no money. I had no money. Didn't want to take on student debt. Wanted to be a bike racer. Wanted to,
Yeah.
And so it led me away from the path of college. And I knew at some point something will come along that's so important that you say, this is what I must do. And that's I felt like what it was, to study ethnomusicology.
Yeah.
Cultures and music and history, geography, and humanity, really. And so I sought out the best ethnomusicologist in America, Dr. Theodore Levin, Dartmouth, and he was the person to really help bring music from Central Asia to America. So we're talking about like Tuva, Mongolia, Uyghurs, and a lot of the stands, Kazakhstan, Tajikistan, that kind of stuff. Music of the Silk Road, really, between Siberia and Russia, or Siberia in Russia and in China through that, that beautiful kind of steppe land. So anyway, I had heard music, I had read his liner notes, I had learned about his ethnomusicology program because it's an obscure, thing to study, and then it just so happened he was coming through Tucson.
What?
with the Hunhur Tu, the throat singers of Tuva. So he was
Yes.
like their tour manager.
Yes.
But they were his friends, and he was
Yeah.
using the opportunity to bring Tuvan music and culture to America, travel around with them to these universities, and present these incredible musical performances. And when I found out they were coming to town, I reached out in advance, and I said, this is who I am. I'm a huge fan of yours. I got this radio show. I've traveled to these countries. Ethnomusicology is like my favorite thing, and I've read your book, and I just want like 15 minutes of your time. He said, sounds great.
Yeah.
So went backstage, hung out with the Hunhur 2 guys as they're getting ready for the show, and talked to him. And, you know, like any good professor, was like, what's your story? Tell me your story. And I condensed it. He said, so what do you want to know from me? And I said, well, I liked your stories too. I said, but really what I want to know is I really feel like I feel like I could be an incredible student. And I think I'm ready to dedicate my life to this. And he said, okay. He said, do you play music? I said, well, yeah, I do. And he said, what do you play? And I said, well, mostly percussion, and I studied these things and some wind instruments and, you know, didgeridoo most recently. And he said, okay. He said, so sounds like you have two choices. You can quit your job, leave where you live now, move to the other side of the country in the cold Northeast, go into deep student debt, take my courses, probably graduate with a degree. And he said, and then you'll have no chance of ever really finding a job. He said, because there's no work in ethnomusicology, you know. He said, or you can take all that time and money and travel around the world and interact with cultures and play music with them, and you'll have experiences that are far deeper than you could ever get. And before he could finish the sentence, I was like, thank you, Dr. Levin, and I'm out, out the door. Thank you so much for your wise counsel. He taught me how to go into school, and I'm so grateful for that. What a wonderful professor, what a wonderful teacher.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that's when you went to Australia. That was
I
the
think
first
that
time.
had already happened.
That was already.
I was already kind of in deep.
What was the next time? What was the next trip then? After hearing that conversation, you're just like, that sends you out.
Yeah.
Where does that go?
I can't remember.
Yeah. It was.
There's been some good ones.
Yeah.
But yeah, music as a common thread is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Where was one of your favorite places to travel to, as far as?
Wow. Okay, so there's a big one here.
Okay.
And this one was a surprise because it was so close to home. Because in listening to different musics of the world, the areas that resonated most with me, and I have stories about all of them, and have not traveled to most of these places, but except through the music, and I think that's what kept my wanderlust fed for all the times that I wasn't traveling, which was most of the time. I'd work for 11 and a half months, travel for a couple of weeks. It was that kind of a thing. I wasn't just wandering around the world on a trust fund and having a good time.
Yeah.
God, that would have been nice.
That would have been fun.
That would have been nice.
Yeah.
Was listening to these musics carried me away to these places. Closing my eyes and listening to music like from northern Scandinavia, I could see northern lights with my eyes closed. I could see the reindeer, and those types of experiences fueled me. So I didn't even really need to travel, and it sustained me now, especially with our inability to travel, that I can go to West Africa tonight.
Yeah.
By plugging in.
I'll be there tonight.
I'll be there tonight. So northern Scandinavia, West Africa, Australia for sure. And, native music in this area, especially Paskoyaki or Yoeme culture, was really one of the coolest things I've ever experienced, which helped convince me to stay in Tucson. I feel like when I was just getting here and learning about this big city and what was going on, and I found Yoeme culture and people's connectedness to place through deer dance and through songs and Paskola and all that ceremonies, which if you've never experienced, it's truly one of our greatest treasures as a nation is indigenous music, song, dance, and how it's interwoven into landscapes,
Yeah.
But the one that really blew me away was Hopi, in northern Arizona. Hopi, I had an opportunity to go up to Hopi mesas a number of times, mostly through educational projects. But one time we were invited to watch a night dance inside a kiva, which is marginally allowed if it's a certain dance or a certain ceremony for non-natives.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if you're lucky enough to be invited to Hopi, it's outdoors in the plaza. You sit on top of somebody's roof, and you witness these kachina ceremonies. But once those kachinas go down inside the kiva, they're going back into the third world, which is this sacred space, and it's, that's where ceremony happens.
Yeah.
Not public.
Yeah.
And sometimes those songs and those dances and those ceremonies, that part of culture, is only available to people of that clan, that particular clan, who have been trusted with that information. So to be there at a time when we were invited to come and look down into the kiva and experience some of this, I felt like I was looking back in time.
Yeah.
Through that little portal and that little ladder going down into this earthen structure underground, where people were dancing the same dance, singing the same song that had been sung in that place for thousands of years. And that, I've never experienced anything like that. So I was, I wouldn't say instantly hooked, but just like so moved and honored and affected. And the rhythms, I mean, huge log drums and rattles, made from tortoise shells. And just beautiful pieces of culture that were resonating the earth because they were underground, and the sounds and the rhythms were coming up. And I think that was another one of those instant connections where I felt like I've heard this 1,000 times before, even though I had never really heard that before.
Yeah.
But those vibrations, I think, spoke of the land. And music that's tied to place, I think, for me, is especially powerful.
That's cool. It's really powerful.
Cool.
It's like, I mean, it's this like very amazing system that has been worked out that they have. There's this like, it's advanced technology.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right. That's what I feel like it is. It's just so tuned in and keyed in to the movements of the earth, of the planets, cycles of nature. And so when they can just like harness that and transport you to these places, it's powerful medicine.
Powerful medicine. I learned too, because I was involved with this Hopi musical culture project, that songs and certain instruments, and again, I think it's vibrations. It's never been explained to me that way, but I think it's really vibrations. Hopi, they wouldn't call themselves musicians, more like, I would say magicians, but practitioners, cultural practitioners that use music, can affect the weather.
So like the rain dance.
Exactly. That's real. And I've seen it repeatedly.
Yeah.
In and according to what I've been told that I can share is that a lot of old Hopi songs, but especially played through a flute, can affect the weather and call the rain.
Yeah.
And so seems pretty far out there, but is it really? Can we affect vibrations through the air? Yes.
Yeah.
We're doing it now.
Right. Right. Yeah. When you told me a story about this. This might be a little tangent now, but you told me a story about working with. I want this story. I want this story to come out. If you're comfortable talking about it, but the time that you were working with some of these tribes and burial sites.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah. So I think you're bringing it back around to a question you asked like a while ago. Mm-hmm. So way to bring it back around. I think the question had something to do with...
Ring around the rosy.
Archaeology. Tell me about your work. And I derailed that with music.
Well,
this
is where we wanted
so
to
the
go.
Archaeology thing. So my first experience working like hands-on, in the dirt, doing excavations was on the border, the U.S.-Mexico border. And this was... over 10 years ago, probably even more now that I think about it. Yep, definitely more now that I think about it, 12 years ago.
Again, it feels like just yesterday.
Just like yesterday.
Yeah.
But the border wall was being built on the U.S.-Mexico border. And so as the border wall got closer and closer to the San Pedro River, the cultural resources got denser and denser because this is a critical waterway that still flows, and it flows through southern Arizona and has been a migratory pathway for people and, mammoths. And it's just an epicenter of culture and history along the San Pedro.
Is this also close to the, just as a side, if people are aware of this Clovis first culture? Do you know about that? It's like
Yes.
some of the early, like down Sonoita and...
Yeah, nothing
Okay.
that old. Like
Okay.
all the stuff that we were excavating, we only had to excavate to a certain depth
Yeah.
because that would be the depth of impact of the wall.
Gotcha.
So our very tragic and unfortunate job, because you can't stop the wall,
yeah.
or can you?
Or
We'll
can
talk
you?
about that in a minute.
Yes.
Was to remove the cultural resources so they could be preserved
Yeah.
to benefit science or to benefit tribes who had cultural affiliation to those people. And so we spent most of our time digging up people,
Yeah.
really burials, lots and lots of skeletons. Inhumations is what archaeologists call them, which is a little offensive.
Inhumation.
Inhumations,
Wow.
but
Yeah,
a
that's weird.
technical term,
Maybe
unfortunately.
They can work
But
on getting a better word.
people,
for
let's be honest, we were digging up people,
Yeah.
men, women, children, dogs, little dog burials, and then also houses, pit houses, beautiful artifacts, interesting culture. And of course, the deeper we dug, the older the culture got. Never as old as Clovis, but a couple thousand years. We got
Yeah.
to see, about 1,000 years
Okay.
of who was living in that area and when. And it was continuous culture, really. People never left and came back. It was where people had been living
Yeah.
for a very long time. And so that experience of digging people out of the ground, knowing that they would be, labeled and then put in a little box, and then that box would be given to the Tohono Nation to rebury. And I was okay with that. I saw that I was entrusted with caring for this little person,
Yeah.
or this big, person, and giving it to their ancestors
Yeah.
or their predecessors. What would the skeleton be to the present day?
Yeah. Geez.
Children's children. Yeah.
Ancestors. Yeah, there could
The
still
reverse
be
of
the reverse ancestors.
Reverse. Their ancestors. I'm sorry, I lack the word.
I know.
So they would be given to that future generation to then care for
Yeah.
in whatever way was culturally appropriate. And I was okay with that. And I saw it as an honor, and it was done so delicately because digging human bones out of the ground, there are some laws, federal laws, state laws that need to be followed. But then there's also a lot of unwritten rules that are more of a trust agreement with the tribe. And just because these are people, we're not digging with shovels and hoes. It's, tiny little natural fibered brushes or a single piece of bamboo, like a bamboo skewer that's been sharpened on one end, and digging out, bits of, rock and dirt to expose the bone and carefully, gently place it in a natural material like a paper bag inside a box, sometimes with natural pigments written on the box,
Yeah.
and then given to the, Tohono Nation. And so after doing this for, months and months on end, at some point we got to a place within the excavation where this tiny little person was kind of, emerging from the dirt. And so as we dug, it turns out it was about a 7-year-old girl, this very little person, and curled up in almost like fetal position, was buried. And I knew that the last people who had seen her were probably her family, right, who had put her in
Yeah.
the ground 1,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago. And they were probably sad.
Yeah.
And so the next person to see her was me.
Yeah.
And it was heavy, and I felt responsibility, for her, and beautiful shell jewelry. She had the most beautiful shell jewelry, which was still laying gently on her skeleton, But one day while excavating her, and it was a day where there was no wind, it was on the borderlands, wintertime, it was perfectly still. And from across the trench, which was 100 yards away, really far away, I could see there was a dust devil
Yeah.
coming toward me. That is so strange. Well, I should cover this area so stuff doesn't blow around or get damaged. So I started to kind of pull a little sheet over the little person that I was digging up, and the whirlwind, the dust devil, the Diablito got closer and closer and closer until it got to right where I was standing, right next to this little person, wide-eyed. And what's odd is that there wasn't swirling wind. Like if you've been in a dust devil, you get trashed by
totally.
dust, in every, instantly you're blind. It goes up your nose and your ears.
Yeah.
And this whirlwind came up in the trench and stopped right in front of me, right next to her. And it kind of swiveled on its edge, almost like a top or a dreidel does, And then it gently stopped, and all the dust fell down. I watched this happen with no substances in my system.
Yeah.
Promise.
Yes.
Some water, some coffee, probably some food. But that was about it. And I watched this happen. And it was unexplainable.
Yeah.
Like, wow. So I felt an increased responsibility to like care for this person.
Yes.
Which I did, and we did, and everybody I worked with is so conscious of it. And I got to work with somebody who worked for the Tohono O'odham Nation as like a cultural practitioner and a consultant, and sweet and wonderful man who I learned a lot from, especially about O'odham culture. But I asked him, I said, would it be okay when you rebury her, especially, but when you rebury these people, you know, could I come? He said, yeah, maybe I'll invite you. And he didn't, which is fine, because those are very private, very sad, heavy, you know, ceremonies.
Yeah.
And so on one particular random day, unbeknownst to me, I was driving out across the Tohono O'odham Nation, and I knew that the reburial would happen in the wintertime.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I knew. And as I was driving, heading toward like the town of Wye and Aho and further out in the middle of nowhere, out in the western deserts, on the way to Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, I was driving on the O'odham Reservation, and there was a hand-painted sign off to the side of the road, and it said, reburial, with an arrow, painted on plywood. And I was so tempted to drive down that road.
Oh, my gosh.
Because I have a feeling it was that day, and it was happening then, and maybe I'll just roll up and be like, hey, Joe. You know,
Yeah. I'm here.
I'm here. But I didn't.
Wow.
Which is probably a good move. But that experience of them going back home in a way was what convinced me to kind of stay in archaeology, anthropology, because I didn't like most of the work that I did, you know, monitoring for archaeological resources during a construction project, kind of lame. Doing surveys out across the grasslands, it's nice to be out hiking, but I didn't feel like I was really contributing, you know, much to science, or especially not to native culture.
Yeah.
So those experiences along the border put me more in touch with like the Native American Grave Protection Repatriation Act, which is federal law that says that if you're a museum in the United States of America and you receive federal funding, which they all do, on some level, like if you have any bones, human remains, things that were buried with people, or very important cultural objects, objects of cultural patrimony, you got to give them back.
Yeah.
You got to give them back. It's like the first step toward a little bit of like reparation.
Yes.
Through a formal repatriation process, you know. And it's layers deep and lots of paperwork, and the legislation, which is brilliant in so many ways, is written in such a way that it puts the burden of proof of cultural affiliation on the tribes. So that natives have to convince the museums these really are our people.
Oh boy.
And the academics can say, no, I don't. No, that's not what this, you know, not what this literature says, and it's not what we believe to be true. And a lot of times, the older the individual, the older the artifact, the harder it was for Native people to make that direct connection through science, because they don't have written history, right? It's all oral.
Yeah.
So even though those traditions are more intact because they're oral, they aren't seen as valid. They aren't the same as what was written in the 1800s by early, you know, ethnographers.
Yeah.
So a lot of people can't get their ancestors back because of that, and that frustrated me. And I wanted to kind of help. You know, I wanted to work toward that and do what I could to repair some of the damage that had been done. You know, not by me directly or my family directly, but my culture, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I pursued a position with the Bishop Paiute tribe and worked for them for about 3 years on a project which was to track down through research all of these objects, people, human remains, objects of cultural patrimony that came from the Owens Valley of California. So a lot of time on the computer, a lot of research, and eventually identified 20-some museum collections that had either human remains or these important objects, which were defined by the tribe. You know, the tribe said these are things that are used in funerary ceremonies. And again, a lot of the information couldn't be shared with me, so it was detective work, but with not a lot of information.
Wow.
You know. But eventually found out where the majority of collections and people were, and then traveled with a tribal elder to each one of these locations, especially in the West. There's a few in the East that we didn't travel to because we didn't have the funding or the time for it. But went, and this tribal elder had an opportunity to like see these objects. They're not on display, of course, but they were brought out in a box, and here's, a skull that came into our collection from, such and such a time. And my documentation had showed that indeed it came from the Owens Valley. Here's the direct cultural affiliation, and then start that process so that the tribe could then essentially apply for them to be returned and repatriated.
Yeah.
And it was frustrating and challenging, but wonderful.
It's amazing.
Wonderful experience.
I mean, getting able to help them to reclaim what's theirs.
Yeah.
So a lot of them were just in their collection. They weren't on display necessarily. It was just but they had it. Yeah, good work. Jeez.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. There are so many skeletons in museum collections.
Yeah.
Because, if we go back 120 years ago, science, a lot of it was all based on physical anthropology and are using physics of humans and cranial structure and bones to be able to establish like a racial hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
And that was built into science, unfortunately. So much, anybody who's ever studied physical anthropology know that it's rooted in racism, really, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, changing now, through education. But, so many people, and the foundation of that science, especially American physical anthropology, is based in the notion that the bigger your cranial capacity, the smarter you are. The smarter you are, the higher up you are in the hierarchy of races. And so there was this horrible doctor, Samuel Morton, I believe was his name, who developed craniometry, this science.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
And he figured the only way that he could prove his hypothesis is that, which is, Euro-Americans are superior, was to collect as many skulls as possible from Asians, from Euro-Americans, from Africans, from Native Americans. Get as many skulls as you can, cut the top off of them, fill them with BBs or little, steel balls.
Yeah.
And then count them, pour them out and count them, and that gives you a sense of cranial capacity. And in order to do this, he needed a huge number of specimens. And so, funded by, the U.S. Army Museum and science, American science as we knew it, was, send me skulls. Send me as many skulls as you can. And they all arrived at the, Army Medical Museum, and this study was undertaken. And getting unfortunately, African and African-American skulls was not that hard.
Yeah.
Euro-Americans, there were plenty of people dying from you name the disease, wasn't that hard either.
Yeah.
But for natives, who most native cultures that I've worked with have only been in the West. So mostly California, Arizona, Nevada, a little bit of Utah, Colorado, that zone. But most cultures that I've interacted with have an absolute reverence for human remains.
Yes.
Other cultures, not so much.
Yeah.
Tibetans, for instance, you can play a flute made out of a human femur, and it's cool.
Right.
Because that person's long gone.
Yeah.
It's like a feather from a bird.
They don't touch them for a little in the beginning, and then they just put them up on the hill and have the vultures eat them.
Right.
Tear them apart and,
Right.
then make some instruments out of their body.
But native cultures of the Southwest, especially Paiute people who I grew up with and ended up, working for a few years, respect and reverence, and you don't mess with a dead person's things. You burn a lot of their stuff when they die.
Yeah.
And, you can remember them, but you don't talk about them for years after they've passed because you don't want them hanging around.
Yeah.
You don't hold on to your grandfather's pipe because he might come back for it.
Interesting. And here we don't do that as much.
Right.
In the West, we're like... Yep. Taking it all, holding it,
eBay
collecting it, eBay. Yeah, get it out.
Let
them move on. You told me once when you were doing about this work you were doing, a dream you had. Do you feel like
good memory? Yeah, that's
for sharing. And I love this just because it is a very special. And again, it's like people nowadays just let the materialistic, scientific, overly analytical side, just give that a little break. Give it a 5.
Yeah, it's a veil. So maybe drop the veil or part it for a little while.
Yeah,
and I think I tend to have an scientific, analytical brain, but I'm also, the back of my head is kind of open and available to whatever else is out there. So in the research phase of this NAGPRA, Native American Grave Protection Repatriation Act project for the Bishop Paiute tribe, in the beginning of the research, you start local, right? Like, what is the closest museum? Not so much because that museum was collecting back in the day, but what happens is there were these private collectors. They go out, they collect things, and then a generation or two later, somebody finds a skull in, Grandpa's attic, and they go, human remains, we should give this to a museum. I mean, that's kind of the right thing to do,
Yeah.
I think, in most people's minds. Some museum accepts it, takes whatever information they have, and then they store it. And most of what museums do is they store. If you think that you see what's in a museum, that's usually 1/100th of what's underneath.
Wow.
Sometimes much less than that,
Mm-hmm.
or much more than that's down underneath. But
Yeah.
I remember going to UC Berkeley, and there are more human remains on the campus of Berkeley than there are living students. They have more skeletons
weird.
buried
What?
under the pool,
Yeah.
in boxes, and I've seen
Yeah.
a bunch of them, than are students walking above the ground. It's weird.
That is really
It's pretty weird.
strange. Yeah.
Anyway, Davis, same story. A lot of skeletons at Davis.
Oh.
But so in doing this research, started local, and there was actually a tiny little museum that's in Inyo County, south of where I grew up. That's like the Eastern California Museum, and a lot of Western culture. There's some Paiute, exhibits, but really pretty tiny. And so I had reached out to them early on, since they were the closest, and said, "This is who I am. This is what I'm working on. These are the general objects that I'm looking for, but these are all the, indicators. So can you help me through NAGPRA?" Find what you have in your collection. And they said, well, we've already been through our collection, inventoried everything, and we complied with NAGPRA back in the 90s like we were supposed to. So we know that we don't have anything, but maybe something happened between then and now, and just for the sake of being a good neighbor and out of respect to the local tribes in the area, we'll look again.
Yeah.
And so at some point during this work, I had this strange dream at night. And in the dream, I'm traveling somewhere that I've never been before. And it's night, and it's dark, and I have this really strange, like, uneasy feeling. And I'm almost in a car. I'm moving, how you do through a dream. Can't really tell. You're moving at a speed, but you don't know, like, your form of locomotion.
Yeah.
And I arrive at these steps of a Gothic-looking, kind of an entrance. And I start to walk up the steps toward the door, the double doors up front. And inside my head, I can hear this voice screaming, "Get out of here, get out of here, get out of here!" And then I wake up, breathing heavily. So it's not like just a dream, but a dream that was so intense that it woke me up.
Yeah.
And I would wake up and catch my breath. I'm like, whoa, okay, so maybe I'm getting these signs and signals. If you ever end up in this area, whatever you do, get out of there.
Yeah.
And so it happened again and again and again. And each time in the dream, it was like that voice got louder, And what I started hearing was, "Get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here." And I thought it was my own voice in my own head screaming, get me out of the dream, wake up now,
Yeah.
some bad stuff is about to happen.
Yeah.
And so after the fourth time this had happened, I was like, okay, something's definitely up. And I traveled to Southern California to one of the museums. And then on the way back, the tribal elder and I drove separately, which was uncommon. And he went home to his home outside of Bishop on the reservation. And I was driving late at night, and as I drove through the town of Independence, California, I see a sign that says Eastern California Museum. I've never been there before, but I knew that it was a local museum that I'd been in communication with. And I went, oh, that's so cool. Maybe I'll just swing by and see what it looks like.
Yeah.
So I turned down the street, and as soon as I turned down onto this dark little rural road in a rural town in California, my hair on my arm starts to stand up, and I'm like, huh. I'm really not afraid of things generally. So this is an interesting feeling. And as I get down to the end of the street and I pull the car around very slowly and the lights shine up onto the front of the museum, I realize that's the thing that I was seeing in my dream.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm like, get out of here. So I step on it and I get the hell out of there. And I'm breathing heavily. And then, on the hair on the back of my neck is just like pinning. And so I drive home and I go to sleep. And I was like, something's up with that place. Like something's up with the Eastern California Museum. The very next day, I went back to work, and waiting for me on my desk was a packet from the Eastern California Museum. I'm like, isn't this interesting? So I open it up, and it's like, dear Mr. Nelson, we reviewed a request. It turns out we actually do have these human remains within our collection. And at that moment, as I started looking through, objects and information that they had provided, I heard that voice, and that voice was screaming, "Get me out of here! Get me out of here! Get me out of here!"
Yeah.
And it was a person or people that were trapped there that knew that I was looking for them.
Yeah.
And I wasn't going to find them because the information I was being given is that, no, there's nothing to see here. There's nobody here.
Yeah.
That's real.
Yeah. Yes. It is. It is real. I'm feeling it right now. I'm feeling that feeling right now. Chills. It is interesting because you just think like, wow, it really is important to allow these beings to rest, and whatever's still there, imprints and bones, and it's just there in that deep way. And it's so cool. It's really cool you got to do that, and we're a part of that, bringing more resolve and peace to some of these people. Wow. I'm wondering what your favorite, if you have any favorite like music from any of those tribes you worked with, or is there any kind of like indigenous American music that,
Oh yeah. Wow, where to begin with that? That's a good one. I'll say Hopi music has been the most powerful, I feel like, that I've seen and felt when it comes to like music and dance. Then Yoeme culture, Pascua-Yaqui tribe from southern Arizona and northern Mexico. That's another one of those experiences that convinced me that the veil between, reality as I see it, know it, and music and magic and time, that veil is wavy.
Yeah.
And deer dance, Pascua-Yaqui, Yoeme is their name for themselves, Spanish Mexicans call them Pascua-Yaqui, and many tribal members call themselves that too, but Yoeme is the name for the people, and this is a tribe that's from where these three rivers meet the ocean down in Sonora, tiny little pueblos, Bicam and others, and they were chased out of Mexico, unfortunately, by the Mexican army, and ended up in southern Arizona. So there are these small communities in Tucson, Marana, Guadalupe, in places where you find Yoeme culture. But I was invited to go to a Yaqui deer dance, and this was around Easter, which is when most celebrations for that culture are happening.
I think I saw a deer dance in Cochise Stronghold when we were down there once at an Airbnb. My partner and her family, and they said there's this, I'm pretty sure it was a deer dance. They said there's a dance going on just down the street. They offered anybody that was around here to come and watch if you want to. And it was just like, it wasn't open to the public. It was just like, I'm pretty sure that was it.
Wow. And it might have been an Apache deer dance too, because of course lots of tribes have deer dances, which is a very significant
it might have been an Apache
animal.
Deer dance.
But
it was around Easter. I remember it specifically that was around Easter.
Could have been Yaqui.
Okay.
Yoeme. So it's this this beautiful blending, and some people feel that it was a matter of cultural survival. Once Spanish came in order to survive and to retain your culture, you had to adapt a little bit.
Yeah.
Welcome the Jesuits and others, and then maybe on the side continue a little tribal stuff.
Right.
And Yoeme especially really integrated. Kept their deep animist roots, but then also integrated these elements, like these mystical, beautiful elements in some ways of Catholicism and that religion into their culture. And so there was this beautiful story shared with me that when Yoemes first encountered Jesuits, the immediate oh, you're a brother, it was the cross.
Yeah.
Because the cross had been used as the Yoeme symbol probably from the beginning of time. Yeah. And so when these strange people arrived carrying their symbol, they were like, come on in.
Yeah.
It led to some really bad things.
Right. But
the cultural survival, which is, inspiring, continues today. Yeah. And so to be able to see these, beautiful ancient dances in their pure form on UMA lands. Was really pretty amazing. And it was another one of those, if this didn't happen to me, I totally would not have believed it. And again, no substances, because there have been plenty of those in my life that have inspired wonderful experiences.
Sure. We can talk about that
we
too
can talk about
another
that.
time. That's
right. But going to a Yaqui deer dance, UMA deer dance during Easter time, and then watching this old UMA deer dancer from Mexico, Luis Masso is his name, I'll never forget it, this old man who came out, and their eyes are covered, so you can't see. It's just like, a little white thing over the top, and then a deer's head, attached to the top. And then, moth cocoons that are wrapped around their lower limbs, which shake whenever they walk, and big gourd rattles. And then singers playing water drums, giant gourds suspended over a thing of water, and then rasps, ironwood rasps, and these beautiful UMA songs. Like the singing component of it is just amazing. So hearing these songs, smelling the fire, from the mesquite, and then watching this deer dancer, like I really watched this man turn from a man into a deer. So much so that he no longer looked like a man. I couldn't see male forelimbs. I couldn't see, a chest. This man transformed into a deer and danced around and then went back into his man body. Had I not seen it, never would have believed it. And I don't expect anybody to really believe like what I saw in my experience, but that was another reminder of like that veil between music and magic and history and culture and spirituality. And it's pretty thin.
It's thin.
Pretty thin.
Yeah. It's beautiful. Gosh. When you were during this time, I do want to bring up the DJing that you were doing. This awesome music show, local KXCI radio station, that you've introduced a lot of people to world music like this. That's just, these amazing artists from all over the globe. When did that start? Like, when did you start?
That was an outlet for my sharing what I was really passionate about. I was collecting music like a fiend, studying a lot of different musics, and the more I listened to, the more I learned that things were related. How could this music sound just like this other music from the other side of the planet with no obvious cultural connections? Is that possible? Yeah, it is. So sharing that and just cool, funky sounds, like who would ever hear like music from like the jungles of Guyana? Let's play some of that on the radio.
Yes.
But yeah, that's all it was. It was an opportunity for me to share what I was most passionate about with music and ethnomusicology, cultures, connectedness, through the radio. Because the radio is like, it's the people's medium. And I think it's transforming and evolving beautifully in a way into things like this, like podcasts and like, online and streaming, where people are creating and curating musical experiences or conversations. And it's not computer generated, because that's garbage. Really, algorithms for what people, should be listening to is really pretty hideous.
Yes.
So yeah, I found this local community radio station, and I remember listen to it all the time because it was so funky and cool. They played Grateful Dead late at night. There was this country music that reminded me of growing up. It was just a cool, eclectic mix of music, native music, on the weekend, and like weird stuff from all genres you can imagine. And at one point, I heard one of the DJs say, "If you're interested in learning more about radio broadcasting, you should consider KXCI's DJ class. For more information, call." And I was like, "Yes, please."
Yep.
So I took the class.
Yeah.
And at the end of the class, they told us, my teacher was Mike Landwehr, a really wonderful friend who was involved with KXCI for decades, passed away just a few years ago. I'll miss him forever. Love that man. But at the end of the class, he said, if anybody here has an idea for a program and it's a type of music that's not already being played, he said, please submit your idea. And I raised my hand. I was like, I have an idea. He's like, well, why don't you write it down, like a description of about how long it would be and like blah, blah, blah. And so it really just kind of came to me. I said, I want to do a show that's like Global Rhythm Radio, where every week I take listeners on a musical adventure to another country. So maybe we'll spend 30 minutes listening to like traditional music from West Africa, and then we're going to head into the clubs, and then we'll hear some contemporary music from West Africa, and and so of course let's do that. And so it gave me an opportunity to study all week long and then present. And so in lieu of going to school, that's really what I did. And I did it for probably 15 years, and then took a little hiatus, and then started doing it again, and COVID has forced me to take another little hiatus. But it's been studying about a specific country or culture or a musical instrument that is found in other countries, and then pulling together the best music I can find to demonstrate that's listenable and fun and not too much information, but you're listening with your heart like we talked about before, and then sharing that with people.
Yeah.
And so it's been... it's just become part of my life.
It's an amazing show, and so for folks to, well, I'll say it right now. It's on Thursdays at 7 to 9. Sorry, 6 to 8. 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. Arizona time.
But I just, KXCI.org.
Yeah.
And you can listen to previous shows and things like that.
Do you have a catalog of all your shows you've
No.
done?
Once upon a time, I recorded them on cassette. And I filled up shoe boxes full of cassettes of shows.
Where are they?
They're gone now.
No.
Yeah, I think they've all been recycled. And actually, you can't recycle. Let's be honest. They're in a landfill.
Let me be honest. I threw them in the landfill.
I threw them away. Yeah, during one of the moves and storing them in a shed in Tucson. Like it's full of like pack rat urine and the fidelity not so good. But so many interviews. I think about it now. I'm like, wow. I interviewed David Hudson, my didgeridoo guru, when he had traveled from Australia to Arizona. I'm like, you got to come on my show.
Yeah.
And lots of conversations with musicians, either on the phone or in person. But like everything, it's ephemeral, you know.
Which is beautiful in a way too. That it's just in this age of wanting to, get it all, and it's just
archive it,
keep it, archive it.
No.
It's like just there it is. It was a moment in time, but you can still hear them. There are still some out there, and then
and it's radio waves, right?
Yes,
and so those go on forever.
Yeah.
And so really, if you end up somewhere in the universe at a certain time and you have the ability to grab that, like the show will be flying by from whatever, 10, 15 years ago. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, radio waves go on forever. So somebody in fill-in-the-blank planet might be listening, right?
Global Rhythm.
Global Rhythm Radio.
Their globe.
Thank you.
On their globe. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. I forget that. And I feel like for radio, that's one of the reasons why I love tuning into the radio, or I stream other channels. I have stations from around the country that I'll just like dip into, and it's just like, oh, cool. This is live right now.
Yeah,
this is live. I prefer on the AM FM receiver here. Like, what can I get here? And just knowing that there's these waves coming out with music, it's awesome. It's so cool.
Vibrations.
It's vibrations.
Once again,
good vibrations.
Good vibrations.
I just want to give a little chance. Actually, before I have you plug some stuff, and with some of the projects that you've been up to, this is something I've been asking everybody. 2 questions, and maybe they could be at some point they'll evolve into deeper questions. But for now, I'm keeping it to this. What is your favorite movie of all time?
Wizard of Oz.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I could think of a few others. The Mission, Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's a couple, but no, really, the first one that came to mind, which is probably true, is Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
The story, the characters.
Yeah.
The common threads.
Yes. It is. It's
alternate realities. I mean, really, it's so well done. I love it.
I'm excited to.
Don't like the musical part of it, I'll be honest. Like,
the music.
I had a really hard time getting into all the songs, which is what it's really well known for. It's a musical.
Right.
Like, I can kind of get past that.
Yeah.
But yeah, epic story.
It is, I totally agree, and I'm really excited to read the books series with my little one when she's old enough.
Yeah.
Because I never read them.
Yeah.
And I'm stoked because I've heard really good things. And what was what was your favorite toy growing up?
I still have it, actually. So I have a teddy bear whose name is Teddy that I got on my first birthday. I'm a November birth, so I got it when I was a month old. No, it's my first Christmas. I'm sorry. So I was born in November. I got it my first Christmas. So I got it when I was about a month old. So so now that bear is 46 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And it hangs out in the bedroom. It wears like a little shirt that I used to wear as a little kid. And so I had lots of, I probably had lots of fun toys.
Yeah.
My bicycle was always probably my favorite, but
Yeah.
it's the one that's gone with me everywhere.
That's it.
As I've traveled, and not when I don't take it when I travel.
You
I'm
didn't
sorry.
take it to Australia.
No.
Like,
Do you mind if I rub my Teddy?
Can I put Teddy down next
Doubles
to me?
as a pillow. No, but it's remained with me my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell folks a little bit too about what some of the projects that, obviously, we talked a little bit. I'll just say the Chaparral Kirtan Band. You can check that out. Hopefully, album is coming. It's finishing up in the works. It's fun stuff. Really
it's beautiful.
Also,
the Cat Stevens cover that gets thrown in,
really
like
pretty.
I have to say, that remains a highlight. And I haven't heard, the album. We worked on it years ago, and it's been coming together. Creative process has been slow but sweet, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, that beautiful Cat Stevens, The Wind.
Oh, pretty.
And then that goes into Om Masato, this beautiful mantra.
I love that one.
Okay,
That's my
sorry
favorite
to
one.
derail again.
No, they're not. This is good. So I also just want people to know about the project you worked on. This might not be just a simple plug, so I want to give a little time, but the Hopi Canyon band.
So that's a whole nother conversation.
And I tried pronouncing it already a few times before, but I'm going to let you do it.
It's a Hopi word. It's actually the Hopi name for Grand Canyon. And literally translated from Hopi to English would be Salt Canyon. But it's Eongtupkwa, Ongtupkwa, with an umlaut over the O. Eongtupkwa, Ongtupkwa, and the Hopi name for Grand Canyon. But it's this, Hopi music project that I was involved with that I'll tell you more about when we get together again. But beautiful experience to record inside a culturally significant structure, the Desert View Watchtower on the south rim of Grand Canyon, with a traditional Hopi singer and a guy who plays a flute that's a replica of a 2,000-year-old flute. It's the oldest, wind instrument as far as we know in this part of North America.
Wow.
That's Hopi, and it was found in a cave, and he's got a replica of it. And me playing clay pot drums along with this ancient flute and Hopi sounds, really pretty amazing and deep and wonderful stuff. And
it's beautiful. Documentary. There's the album. Where can people find that? Where can people get that one?
Probably on the great internet. All you got to do is spell the thing. Good luck with that, right?
Well, you did spell it, so just rewind and then plug it in and find it.
Ongtupkwa.com. Yeah, you can order a copy. You can watch, snippets of it or listen to things. But it's the DVD is especially cool, I feel like. I love the music that we recorded. But it was all like a first take.
Yeah.
We got the permission to record an album inside Grand Canyon National Park, inside the Desert View Watchtower, which is covered with Hopi murals, from back in the day from Fred Capote. And so being able to go in there and record these songs. But the three of us had never played together before.
Wow.
We had one evening with a sound engineer and a video guy, and the end result is just beautiful because Clark, the Hopi singer, just really sings these beautiful, beautiful Hopi songs that he's written.
Yeah.
So they're in a way contemporary, but sung in traditional language in a very traditional Hopi style. But they're not ceremonial songs, right? Because he can't be sharing those or recording those. So instead, they're songs that he's written alongside this earthy sounding flute, which is really cool, and then deep sounds from clay pot drums.
And then people can still hear you, although not live right now, but they can listen to shows on KXCI. You can stream it if you're not around here, and you can hear that on Thursdays at 5 to 7 p.m. Arizona time. Is there anything else that you want to plug?
No, just gratitude, man. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate, sharing time and energy, outdoor space. Got the birds and dump trucks and urban sounds, and it's real, and I love it.
The birds, the dump trucks, the traffic, the wind.
Yeah.
It's all there. It's all there. And make sure to get out to the Arizona trails. Support Arizona trails. And man, I'm excited. I would love to have you come back, and we'll do more.
Yes, please. We'll talk about Ongtupkwa. There are lots of stories there.
Yes.
Some heavy stuff, like some dreams, some ancient things, some culture, some repatriation.
Yeah.
Some
All right, that's
good stuff.
That's a nice little nugget to get for the next one. All right, brother, man. Really good to see you.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Ditto. Okay. Yummy, yummy, yummy. That was good in my tummy. I hope it was nice for you. Gosh, being able to just hang outside with Matt, the birds, you got to hear that. It's amazing. What fun stories and cool stuff This guy does. Love it. In an age where we have a tendency maybe towards overly analyzing and overly scientizing things, the magic and mystery will always remain. And hearing some of these stories about the time his archaeology work that he was doing, whew, love it. He told me a story like one of the archaeology stories once when we were driving back from a kirtan we did up in Oracle, Arizona, on a ranch, and was driving back at night with him and his daughter. And gosh, it was just so fun, driving through the desert at night. It's nothing like it. Very, very magical and beautiful. Matt is so cool. I want you to make sure you check out all the music that we were talking about, and please tune into his radio show. I'll put some links on there on the page, the episode notes. And gosh, good times. Love it being around people. Cherish your friends. Use them wisely. As my Garfield mug says. And he's on a skateboard and Odie is running in front, pulling him. You got to use your friends wisely. And that way, Garfield might have been taking advantage of Odie. But a more higher purpose would be to really just cherish and savor what you can learn from the people that you know and what they can teach you, what they share with you, their life experiences. It's really precious. Yeah. So great time hanging out, and I can't wait to see Matt again, and I can't wait to hear you all, what you think about what I'm doing here. If you have any ideas or notes for me, please send them my way. You can find me on the big World Wide Web, the galactic internet. Okay, take care. Peace be with you.
They all